Hey everybody, Anish Majumdar here to spend a little bit of time with you guys going over a topic that I think is essential for any leader who's serious about moving forward, the January trap, right? Why do smart leaders lose leverage in the first 30 days? Okay, so I want to lead you guys through this. I hope it's going to be like a real eye opener for you guys. And let me just explain why I'm doing this, right? Why am I taking time away from coaching leaders to do this open session? I've been a career coach, for those of you who don't know, for about 16 years. I specialize in working with high performers, deserving leaders who feel overlooked, undervalued, underpaid, and feel like they need to correct how they're coming across, like in the room as leaders in order to get the job done. And they can't do it, right? And I work with them to change that perception. I work with them to make astonishing growth happen, even in situations that feel like it's static or even stagnating. And I help them as necessary leave their current situations behind and without job seeking, but as a leader, create opportunities for themselves, right? That's been my domain. And so I'm talking to leaders all across every major industry you can imagine, right? That's my day, that's my week, that's what I love to do. And so I hear people's concerns, right? And I hear this thing over and over again. And the closer it gets to the end of the year, the more I hear this, right? And it's a variation of this, okay? Anish, it's all good. I hit every single target that's there and I'm good. Anish, I've been so busy with projects that I haven't even had time to that, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to get that bump up. Anish, I've been delayed from that bump up from VP to SVP for 2 years now. This is going to year. They've told me that. They said there's not going to be any holdbacks, and I'm taking them at their word. I'll hear all of these things. And as I hear them, there's a part of my mind that's going like, look, I know it's nice to think that way. Like I really trust me, like I am a dad to three, right? I like delusional thinking as much as anybody else. I'm going to have time to do that hobby tomorrow. I'm going to have the ability to have everything sorted out, but it just doesn't happen like that, right? Leadership and especially negotiating better outcomes for yourself is a contact sport. And what I hear from most people is they're not looking at it, they're not dealing with it, they're not looking at that as an objective to meet. They're just treating it as something to kick down the line. And the vast majority of those people will get bupkis come conversation time. The reason why is because January itself, or the beginning of the year, or the beginning of the next quarter, really doesn't mean anything, right? That's just a time frame. Your perception, though, in terms of what is your actual pathway and leverage that you can apply to the situation, what is the scope or the vulnerability points, right? What's the calculation of what it's going to cost this company to actually level you up versus keeping you exactly where you are, right? Which is better for most people there, right? These are the topics, these are the question marks, and they're the things that ultimately are going to determine whether or not you actually see the outcome. And so right off the bat, if you're here and you're learning this and you're open to it, that alone tells me something, right? That alone tells me that on some level, you're not just entirely putting your head in the sand, right? So if you're here, let's talk about what you can do instead, right? How can you actually increase your leverage and your chances of getting the thing that you want? How do you apply that right degree of pressure? This is for directors, VPs, heads of function, senior leaders, anyone who right now is consistently delivering at a high level. I'm not talking about excuse makers, right? Or people who lucked into a job, right? These are for people who feel habitually under leveraged relative to the impact that they're delivering. I'll work with a lot of people in tech, in finance, who are literally making company changing shifts happen, but that's not changing the way that they're seen in the room, right? Or the results that they see, right? People who sense promotion conversations are eternally circling, but never landing, and who feel the frustration of that. Like, how many more times am I going to kick the bucket down another 12 months while other people in the company get rich and get successful, right? How is it always their turn, their day in the sun, and never mine? Feel one step removed from real authority, right? Or have real authority taking those ideas from you, right? And are tired of almost their feedback. Who this is not for, just at the beginning, this is not for habitual skeptics. I'm just here to share with you what's been working for my clients, what we've seen working there. If you're in a zone where you're literally looking for reasons to stay put and not do anything, this is probably not for you. This is not for early career professionals. These are not people who are waiting on the permission of others to save them or validate them, okay? I'm going to assume that if you're here, you're a leader who already knows enough about himself or herself to know that you yourself are the greatest determiner of change. You yourself are the single biggest X factor you can marshal towards that. If you are not thinking in that way, that's employee talk and you're going to hate this. Okay. Here's what we're going to cover, right? Why does excellent performance often block advancement? Why does your most vaunted, in all likelihood, capability, right? Your ability to do stuff within the domains that you specialize in. Why is that actually cutting you off at the foot most likely right now? What are the behaviors you're doing right here and now that is actually eroding your leverage come January, right? What are senior executives actually looking at you for, right? Hint, hint, it's not the same stuff they've been looking at the last 11 months, right? But if you don't switch to that and if you get play to that, they're waiting for a signal from you that never comes. And that in itself is a signal that you don't belong at the level that you've earned, right? How to reposition yourself quickly without self-sabotage, and how to apply the press system as your operating system under pressure, right? How can you actually put yourself into a zone where you're not repeating this cycle in different roles, different companies over and over again, right? Which would be a moronic use of time. I think we can all agree. All right. So take a look at these 5 bullets. Ask yourself right now, how many of them apply to you, right? Feel stalled? Do you assume January is a clean slate, even though you fear that it's not, right? You keep explaining instead of repositioning. Sometimes top performers have to defend their roles leading up to this, which is an enormous red flag, okay? None of that is the real problem, okay? And before I reveal that, just for those of you who don't know me, just a couple of numbers at a glance, all right? My passion is unlocking this in people. I was an actor for the better part of 2 decades, a journalist and a writer, and for a shy, introverted Indian kid, it was magical to be able to perform and understand through working with highly seasoned veteran stage screen actors how you didn't have the luxury to wait on confidence. You didn't have the luxury of waiting around for permission. If you're going out there on stage tonight, you have to access that optimal version of yourself now. You have to access that leader in you, that optimal version here and now in order to get the result. You do not have the ability to wait anymore. Not when the fire is there, not when the window is there. So today, in working with leaders, I work with people who are in that window, not people who are begging for a chance, not people who have tried and failed their whole lives, people who right now know I'm getting the exposure that I need to make a change happen. I'm getting the insights and the access to game-changing initiatives. Now is the moment to strike for myself, right here. And when that's there, 60,000 plus hours in, we jump in and we make that happen, right? You've probably, if you have come to my world through LinkedIn, you've probably seen some of my work in MSNBC, Fast Company, all those nice, national outlets and stuff that make you seem better. Who cares? Let's go into how this is going to affect you, okay? Here's the problem, the crux of it. And I want you to grab a pen, a paper, write this down, okay? The reason your past promotion impact, the reason the past times you've tried to increase the scope, scale, whatever, the reason it didn't work is most likely because you're treating a leverage problem like a performance problem, right? Your performance is not an issue. How well you do in your role is not an issue, right? But the problem is you've gotten so acclimated to solving every challenge that hits you professionally that way through another solution, another thing, that right now it's actually sabotaging it. Right when we need silence, confidence, and focus from you, we're getting desperation, more and more output. And so it's actually sort of delegitimizing the work that actually got you into that promotion conversation to begin with, right? More output, more visibility, more justification, more self-editing. None of that should be on your purview right now. None, zero. If that's going on, step 1 is to identify and curb that, okay? At least until you're in that room, right? Why? Because despite what you may think, I know that I'm the same way. I mean, rather than being patient, rather than sticking with a course of action that works, letting things shift in the right way, I'm going to try throwing 5, 10, 15 things at the wall, hoping something fixes, right? That's why it doesn't work, right? So number 1, I want you to understand the reason it doesn't is because you're thinking of it one way, but leadership is looking at that and looking at what you're doing, and they're saying, oh, this person still needs my permission to advance, right? You're still selling after you should have stopped selling a long time ago. And as anyone in sales will tell you, that's a cardinal sin, right? So understand this. You're not going to be evaluated here based on additional effort. There's no additional effort you can or should do right now that is going to make you even 1 iota more likely to be able to get that outcome. So stop wasting that effort, okay? Redirect that focus towards what actually will, okay? What you're being evaluated on is the clarity of your executive signal under pressure. Read right now when we are wrapping up or trying to wrap up 1 year and we don't exactly know what that next year is going to be. That's your window. That's what you need to be looking at. That's what you need to focus on. So number one, let's just dump all that insecure crap and let's look at what we need to do, right? Here's the core reframe I want you to think about, okay? We were all sold this. Many of you came up being rewarded as the good student, being rewarded as the person who could take on more crap and still smile. All of that is going to sabotage you now at the higher levels, okay? And if you came up that way, you're going to have more relearning to do. You're going to have a higher road to climb here in order to get to where you feel you want to do, because you're going to have to unlearn a lot of that junk. Promotion follows performance, right? But if that's the case, we would see millions and millions of promotions being put out there every year, and we absolutely don't. We see a small fraction of that, right? Excellent performance, actually, what it does, it makes you come across as familiar, right? It makes you come across as a known quantity, even if you're the golden boy, for example. It makes others in a company dependent. If it's not a functional company, then yeah, it's amazing to have one person like Marsha who's actually building a division, moving it forward, or like Priyanka. But guess what? Nobody else is changing. We're watching you eating popcorn, making this stuff, knowing that eventually, basically, it'll go back to status quo. You're going to be screwed, and then when we continue, you go and leave. I stay exactly where I am, collecting my paycheck and moving forward, right? This is why leverage needs to be applied. The very same things that got you in there, that allow you to build that trust, to move it forward, right? These now have to be sort of neutralized before you go into that room, because they cannot go into that room with you feeling like, hey, I'm doing you a favor. Let's have this conversation, but listen, we know it's going to be a no, but what are they going to do about it? They're a team player. They're going to say yes. What have they said no to? That's what we don't want. And I'm just being very real with you guys, because I think of myself as a sensitive, empathic person. I think the majority of the people I work with are like that as well. And those people can get taken advantage of here. This is not a time for more niceness. This is not a time for obsequiousness, people pleasing, that low level ingratiating behavior. Okay. That will kill you here. This is a negotiation. It's not a reward. Okay. There is no reward forthcoming beyond what you have. This is not a reward. This is a negotiation. It can be captured by you, and there's things that you can do. It can be refused, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to take that blinder off, and we're going to say, I'm not operating from the lie. I don't believe in that junk anymore. I understand, okay, that A, it's a negotiation. B, you're looking for signals, not more effort. And if that's the case, the approach you want to have going into this, okay, is negotiation, not supplication, okay? So what does that mean? A client of mine, a CEO client of mine, once told me, after he tried many, many years to move forward, and then we worked together, and he actually attained it himself instead of begging for permission, right? He said, Anish, in business, you don't have to bite, right? We don't live in a world where you have to bite. But man or woman, you have to be willing to show your teeth, right? You have to be willing to say, no, I disagree. I'm going to walk. I have standards, and you have to be able to back those up, right? And if you don't, if you came up like in the ways that we're talking about, like people pleasing, over responsibility, right? This is not gonna work well, right? You're gonna feel like this is totally out of your comfort zone. But the thing is, every time you refuse to look at this that way, every time you refuse to lean into your power, access that part of you that doesn't need permission, access the part of you that knows I am the shit when it comes to what I do. Right? I'm the best at what it comes to what I do. I'm the most diligent in terms of looking out for these people. And I have a right to say this. I have a right to communicate, to advocate, right? When you don't do that, when you let your boss lead the conversation, even though you know it 50 times better than he does, right? When you hold back on communicating the real problems because you feel like, hey, you know what? That's actually going to screw up my promotion chances. That is the problem. That is where you betrayed yourself. And that is where we see this big point of vulnerability, okay? So let's just reframe this, okay? Because for those of us who were good students, negotiation feels aggressive. No, it's not. Negotiation is not conflict, okay? It is simply clarity with options. When there's leverage, the tone changes, right? When we know that we're talking with someone who has a crystal clear idea of their true worth, I'm not dependent on you, right? When they have a crystal clear idea of what to focus this conversation on, they don't get flummoxed, they don't get overwhelmed, right? They have that ability and that agency Boom. We're looking at the person who's already gotten that promotion, who's already got that level up. That's the goal. That's what you want. That's what you want to embody. Okay. So just to cap the shift here, okay, because it is essential. You're not going anywhere unless this shift starts here, okay? Behavior changes, outcome changes. You cannot outwork a behavioral problem, okay? Your behavior is both the signal you need to send and the proof of your ability to sustain and succeed at the new level. All right, let's go into shift 2. Here's what I want you to think about when you are in any communications with leadership between now and when you go into that room, when there's a decision made. I want you to focus on 3 things and ignore everything else. Ignore everything else. Okay. January, misdirected effort. That's the thing that you want to cut right at the knees here. Okay. So that means no more explaining to resistant stakeholders, no more defending your worth. Okay. No more chasing alignment. No more creating promotional justification materials, including slide decks and whatever nonsense you want to think about here. That's desperate. Listen to your heart, right? Is it coming from a place of abundance and creation, or is it coming from a place of desperate pick-me energy? Don't do the pick-me energy, right? Privately dismantling yourself, right? You're in there doing world-changing work, but inside the self-talk is you're a piece of crap. You're a failure, right? No judgment. We all started from a rough place and went to a better place. Negative self-talk is still something that I struggle with every single week, every single day. But you get better at identifying it, neutralizing it, right? And you can do the same thing with this type of people-pleasing, low-authority behavior, right? Here are the big 3 I want you to focus on. Every time you're talking about stuff, this is what you're doing. You're not chasing, explaining, or defending. You're doing these. Number 1, 20%. What portion of your role moves the needle most with your boss? Sometimes that can be literally one aspect. I don't want you to be a good student. I don't want you to be like this plus this. Look at what I did here, because he or she doesn't care really about those, right? Where does it hurt that person? Where does it come home to roost? Okay. That's what you want to know. That's what you want to reinforce. Be a broken record about this. But literally every email you send, the frame should be this. Start there. And what you're doing is you're pushing everything else aside. Everything else that is irrelevant, you're pushing aside. You're looking for that to see how we're doing with that and aligning to that. Okay. So that's 1, right? I want you to focus on the 20% that leadership actually cares about and ignore all of the 80% plus right now. Okay. Number 2, I want you to think about post getting the promotion, post getting that outcome. What are the 2 to 3 priorities that most require your help? This is a huge one that leaders refuse to do, are unable to do. This will shift your mind and heart into a place where you've already gotten it. And that's really important to think about. You've got to get out of this thing that says, if you give me permission, I'm going to do it. No, you're a partner of the enterprise. You understand how the meat is made, right? You're not thinking of it in terms of selfishness or ego. You're thinking of it in terms of what we say we want. You want these outcomes. You want that transformation to happen. This promotion, this shift is housekeeping that enables us to happen, that enables that to happen. Okay. And if it doesn't happen, how exactly, what's the plan for addressing this without me? Lay out what that is. Well, we were thinking, I can't do that in my current role. That's an impossibility. So what else can we do? Make it very clear. Do you understand? You're drawing a boundary, but you're also making it very, very clear. I've thought this through. Okay. This is just a part of the plan. I'm not here like hesitantly waiting to stop everything on your go ahead. I want to know from a clarity and leadership perspective, what are we going to do with that? These 2 alone will make a tremendous shift. Okay. Prior to that promotion conversation. The 3rd one, constraints. Here's where I want you to be ruthless. Here's where I want you to be critical. Here's where I want you to understand that we don't respect people who are trying to shine us on. Your job is not to pretend that things are better than they are, or the ideas are not cockamamie if they are, or the problems in this company, some of which are fatal, are not existent. No, you are a barometer of truth. Okay. So I want you to be very clear, right? When we're talking about the road ahead, when we're talking about problems or initiatives, I want you to be very clear and have this information close to access. What is impossible to fix at your current level? What are the issues that are chronic and intrinsic at your level that will never be solved by you or anybody else as long as you are here? How does that limit the work that you do and how you can make change happen? What are the limitations as it relates to resources, authority, speed? Okay. High performers should never be in a situation where you're running it up the flagpole. That's your career and time you'll never get back. And we always have less time in the mix than we think of. We have a shorter career than we think of. We have a shorter time to make that impact than we would like to believe, right? So speed is huge. Buy-in is huge. If a big part of your role is having to reconvince and somehow gain back into partnership, let's say you're in engineering, you have to work with sales. Sales doesn't give a crap about you. Sales doesn't like you, but that role forces you to do that. That's a big problem. And that's a way in which your leadership is permanently capped due to the limitations and frankly, stupid decision-making of leadership, right? I want you to understand this. I want you to see it, right? See the limitations of the scope and look at it from the point of view of, if this company wanted to extract the most of what I can do, right? How is this completely messing the whole thing up? I want you to be fearless when it comes to the criticisms. I want you to actually take the sting out of any of that, okay? Because if you don't, everything here, the constraints become things you have to defend. They have to be things you have to explain and ignore. And all of that behavior sends a signal, you need my approval to get this, and you will not get it. Okay, you will not get it. So that's what I want you to really think about here, okay? The big three is what you're thinking of in terms of comms. Everything else is a distraction, or most likely something that is actively sabotaging, distracting the signal you need to be sending as a leader, okay? Shift 3. Get out of piecemealing all of this crap. High-level leadership is not personality. It's not politics. It's not by accident. People learn it, and people who care enough to learn it, connect with it, and get better at it. Oh, what a shock. They rise up faster. They stay at the C-suite longer, right? They have better reputations. They have to do less to no damage control, right? That's steady control under pressure. And if you're here, you've probably experienced what it's like when that works, right? That feeling where you feel like you're just like 1 to 3 steps ahead of what's there, but you're connected. You understand, you're taking in the room, you're taking in what's going on, but you have a crystal clear, powerful drive forward, right? It will not be brooked, it will not be argued with, but it drives us all forward. That's leadership, right? What I teach my clients is a system called PRESS that covers the 5 big areas, right? And this is what you want to be thinking about in terms of permanently shifting this aspect of your leadership presence, right? Number 1 is priming, right? I don't ever want you to go into a room cold again. That's called reactive positioning, right? Reactive means you're going in and you're letting things happen to you. You've got to have an engine going. You've got to have that connection and that drive going before you go into that room. If you're there, it's too late and other personalities will mess it up. So priming it, right? How to activate that leadership identity in you and bring that out before you even say a word is critical. Then regulation under pressure. I'm seeing people across the board, and I'm really sorry when this happens. But you know what? Just because you say you can lead a team at 3x the size doesn't mean you can. Just because you say, as like a well-qualified woman, I can, go into this team of software engineers who have a misogynistic attitude and everything's going to be fine. It's naive. It's not going to happen that way. These are emotional regulation issues, right? And leaders who are worth their salt, who want the absolute best outcomes for themselves, they understand they have to raise their bar, right? They have to raise their bar in terms of what gets them over the line of overwhelm, right? If you increase this by 10, 15%, that is a completely transformed experience you're having, right? Express to influence, right? This is what we're talking about, right? If you're not looking at the big 3, you know what you're doing? You're not expressing to influence. You're actually bleeding out authority, right? Signaling executive authority is the combination of a lot of these things at the high level. It's the things that coalesce that allow people to say, oh, we need to invest in this person far beyond that role. If you're not doing that, your road towards becoming not a CXO or a higher paid leader, but really just an overpaid specialist, right, is what happens. And that's why you get marginalized. That's why you're not in the room despite drawing a big paycheck or whatever, right? Finally solidifying the shift. No more pretending to be someone you're not. No more pretending to be a type A person when you're not a type A person, right? Priyanka, perfect example of this, right? So this is a woman who's leading up the only profitable division in a healthcare system. Okay, I'm not going to name names, but it's the only one. It's innovating. It's driving moves into AI. It's actually making it happen. But here's the problem. When she came in, it was like, hey, throw her a bone. Nothing's happening here. Throw her the most worthless division. She's turned it into the most valuable division. Even though it's generating revenue, the company is not looking at it as like the lifeline that they should. And they're certainly not looking at her that way. They actually looked at her like, hey, shouldn't you be grateful? Even though you're doing 3 times the work, right, for essentially the same salary, you should be grateful, right? As long as she was operating from that outdated self-concept of this Indian woman made good, right, versus the battle-tested, brilliant senior leader she is today, who can make dramatic changes happen, not just to our bottom line, but to the patient experience, right? As long as that was there, that's what would come out under stress. So working with her, I was able to help her really easily start bringing that second person out, right? Start neutralizing those triggers, right? As they were happening, right? Helped her focus on her big 3, right? And get razor sharp about staying. Those are your guardrails, right? Increasing her capacity to hold hard questioning, right? And to speak honestly about constraints without ego, right? For a recovering people pleaser, that's a really, really key one. Criticism, negativity, things that don't work, it's all fine because none of that impact who you are, your sense of self, but you've got to have clarity. Nothing is perfect, right? So she didn't ask for credibility, right? She embodied it. And what that resulted in was a shift in that room, more purview for her and her people to do what's going on, and an increase from that being this like redheaded stepchild of a division into something that is on the minds and is a priority amongst leadership. A huge change, right? And something that was absolutely necessary there. Right. Shift 4. We're going to go really quickly through this. I know we're going right up to the limit here, the time that I can spend with you guys. If you'd like to continue this, of course, I'll give you guys a quick option at the end of this to reach out to me if that's valuable to you as a leader. Emotional mastery. So we've been talking about this, right? Let me just be a little bit more blunt. High performers are unduly influenced by things like shame. High performers are unduly negatively impacted by things like, if I were to look at you, I don't know who you are. Guess what? You failed. You're a failure. You failed. Okay. You tried, you failed, you were unable to do it. You disappointed us, right? High performers are excessively triggered usually by those types of negative sentiments, right? And so what happens is you'll hear this stuff and your analytical mind goes, well, this person doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. But your emotional side, right? The unresolved side, it comes out as rambling, freezing, right? Defensiveness. How many times have we hated having to explain something? And literally the more we're explaining, we can tell I'm losing the freaking room, right? Susceptible to manipulation as well. There are bad actors out there. Let's not BS ourselves. There are bad actors who, at all levels of an organization, who are designed to look for people who are like this. Overperforming leaders who have self-identity, have that shame aspect, have unresolved things here, right? A lack of a leadership system right here, right? And they will purposely apply the pressure, purposely exacerbate the guilt that's there, right? To make it more likely that you're going to either do what they want without complaint or break down and leave and not threaten them, right? Emotional mastery is not that. It's not suppressing, right? It's not pretending to be someone you're not. It's allowing the feelings to hit, refusing to make it your identity, and holding the boundaries that you need to as a leader anyway, right? This is what Darlene encountered. This is a brilliant CFO, but just she's an introverted person. She analyzes, she likes to get the details right. She's not a networker by nature, right? But what she realized is, right, in the environment that she was at with these big personalities, that meant that no matter what the work that she does, she was taken totally for granted, right? So again, doing this work, being able to establish clear go, no go zones, right? And most importantly, guys, like you want to use this, and I don't see people using this effectively. It's one of your superpowers, if you will. Use strategic silence. You don't have to be talking all the time. Okay. And the higher up you go, the better, the more productive it is. Hopefully you can see that. I'm just slowing down that cadence. And the more you slow down and the more you go into silence, the more you hold up a mirror to what someone else is doing. So let's say you're talking to someone and they're expecting you, hey, Darlene, we came through for you there. You know what I mean? Like you needed a manpower increase. We gave that to you, right? And that was pretty good, right? Nothing, right? Yeah, well, I mean, I know it's not as good as we could have given you. I mean, I know that. I know you asked for a couple of other things, but that helped, didn't it? It didn't help. It didn't help. I mean, okay, fine. You see what I'm saying? I'm exaggerating a little bit, but strategic silence deployed the right way in these environments, right, is a mirror. So instead of you having to, again, don't do this, chase, explain, or defend, right? The big 3 of wounded authority, right? Strategic silence, right? Not giving someone the expected reaction, right? Which you should never be doing anyway. You should be trying to listen and be honest, right? Of what's there. That will bounce that back to you. So it's especially good when someone's trying to pull some crap over you, right? You go into that room. Oh, were we going to have this conversation? Oh, we were doing that now? I thought we still wanted to get that initiative handled before we took a look at your pay. Strategic silence is a phenomenal starting point for those things, right? But you don't get there unless the work is being done to increase your emotional regulation and not be essentially an overgrown child when stress goes beyond your your limits. I can always tell you who the biggest fake leaders are, and having spoken to tens of thousands of people and worked with thousands, a little over 2,000 people personally, I will tell you the worst leaders I've ever seen are people who pretend to be like emotionally connected. They pretend to be sort of like they're plugged in, right? But they're absolutely terrified of their emotions. They have no idea how to handle it. And when you see them move out of their comfort zone, they break like a cheap suit. And not only do they take themselves down, they will often take the company down if they're a CEO, and they will absolutely try to take you down as well. They spread their inability in this area as a disease to everyone around them. And when they all fall, they look at that as proof to keep doing what they're doing, right? Unscathed. Don't be like that, right? One last shift, okay? And a reminder here, okay? The window always closes fast. Don't assume that you're going to be able to walk in there and get the outcome ever. And absolutely don't assume that just because you're in a leadership capacity now with exposure now, that's going to just randomly open up for the rest of your life. I've seen people not capitalize on that opportunity and spend the next 3 years of their life basically in BS consulting zone, underemployed zone, really, right? I've seen people who are there once in a lifetime opportunity, right, to make this happen inside of this tech company, right? And they fail, they're pushed out, they're unable to be resilient and step forth as the leader they needed to access right now. And now it's a downward spiral, right? From 550K to 350K in 3 years, down to 250K. And guess what? Inside of 10, 175 is going to be feeling pretty good. This happens. This happens all the time, right? You do not get unlimited shots at leverage, right? And if you're in a decision forming window, this would be the time that you need help, right? This would be the time when you need to replace all of this crappy, excuses, right? With actual help and support and actual accountability, right? The people who get this done, they're looking to maximize their chances here of success and play this game in a way so that success is going to happen regardless of how January goes, right? That momentum is there, but the window is right now, okay? This is for a few of you. For those of you who've gotten something beneficial from this, review the notes, implement, okay? Do something different. Absolutely do not go back into that crap of denial, okay? And false leadership. For those of you though who know, like I've just started, but this is a little too general for me, right? I need to go a little bit deeper to be able to see exactly how I can implement this for myself. helloanish.com/let's talk. If you take a look here, it's just a simple page here that should pop up. A couple of questions, but it'll allow you, if you want, to book a little bit of dedicated time with me to do what's called a free leadership presence audit, okay? I'm offering this complimentary, but it is for senior leaders only, people who are in the mix right now, people who are feeling that running clock going of urgency in terms of really doing something right now. If it's you, I encourage you, take a second, hop onto my calendar. Let's talk before things close out here, before it's too late. Let's figure out how you can start implementing this stuff. And, if it makes sense, we can obviously talk about working together. If it doesn't make sense, you can leave with some crystal clear clarity here. And obviously a relationship made that hopefully will help you as you move forward. Okay. If that's not interesting to you, absolutely do not force it. The calendar is busy enough as it is. Okay. For everyone else, it's helloanish.com/let's talk. Okay. Hope this was helpful to you guys. Time to hop off and get back to the business of coaching leaders. I encourage you to do the same.